All right.
All right, everyone, I would like to introduce Julie Glovin, presenting conflict resolution skills today.
All right. So just to start, if you have questions, just ask. We're a small group and that's fine, or you could put it in the chat, okay? So we're going to talk about conflict resolution. So first of all, and you don't have to answer this unless you want to, you tell me which one do you generally kind of feel like you're more like in terms of when you're thinking about interpersonal conflict? Are you more the type that's like, bring it? Are you more the type that's kind of like, I see something going and I want to avoid? And if anyone wants to share, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. But generally, in terms of when we're thinking about conflict, how we deal with conflict, we usually have sort of a default style. But that doesn't mean that in different situations, we don't deal with it differently. And the way we all deal with conflict is really on that human continuum of behavior, where on one hand, it's more that kind of bring it. And then on the other hand, it's more like, whoa, I'm out of here. And we're going to start to talk about why that is. But before we do, I just want to have like a general sense of, I want us to be on the same page about how we're defining conflict. So what is conflict? What comes to mind?
Disagreements.
Disagreements? Okay, yep. What else?
A discord between two people or a group of people.
Yep. Disagree. Can you just say that a little bit louder? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, like a discord between like two people or a group of people.
Okay, yep. Discord between two people. Yep. What else?
Misunderstandings, maybe.
Yeah, definitely misunderstandings as well, right? That often happens when we're trying to communicate, you know, what we want. So basically, conflict is an active disagreement between people, right? With opposing opinions or principles, and it's also competing needs. What do you think, how do you think most people feel about conflict?
They don't like it.
They don't like it. Yeah, I think that the majority of people don't like conflict. And we're going to sort of talk a little bit more about why that is, but I'm going to put that out to the group. Why do you think that's the case? What is it about conflict that people are dislike?
We don't really like to do like the hassle of trying to like not only engage in conflict but do damage control.
Okay, yep. Might be that need for damage control. What else?
I think most of the time I worry that like the conflicts with others will prevent me from like achieving my own goals.
Okay. And can you say a little bit more why there's that sort of fear?
Like, if I want to like do something and the others don't like it, it might make it harder for me to achieve my own goals.
Yeah. Okay. Right. People actually might sort of put up some sort of a barrier for you to do that for a number of reasons, right? There's some truisms about conflict. So first of all, conflict is an everyday part of life. It's an everyday part of being in relationship. Most of our conflicts with each other, they're kind of minimal, right? They're like on a scale of 0 to 10 with the people that we interact with most. They're probably like a 2 or 3. Where do you want to go for dinner? What do you want for lunch? Often we don't necessarily engage in anything where it escalates into it becoming more of difficult conflict, but often it does, right? And how we deal with conflict is based on a number of things. There's our own personal biology, there's our childhood upbringing, how we were told or how we interpreted how conflict was handled in our family. So if it's a family perhaps where people yell a lot, but then they're done, and they're probably more comfortable with conflict than maybe another family where if there was the threat of conflict, then maybe someone might have been mad for a couple of days, and then there's like this need, that more of that need for damage control. There's gender expectations, cultural differences on how we deal with conflict, and also our own underlying values. So there's a lot that goes into conflict and conflict resolution. But conflict is also positive, and that positivity is that it can help deepen relationships. It can help people understand each other. It can help generate ideas when we are working in a group if the conflict is able to be channeled in a certain way. But it's also challenging. One of the things that makes it challenging is that humans, we like to be right. I think we all like to be right. And most of us don't want to be seen as wrong or misinformed or something. It can make us maybe feel a little bit humiliated. So a lot of us want to avoid that. The other piece of that is that because humans are self-aware, we have these belief systems that we develop about our place in the world. And obviously with deep values, so this is why politics can be very difficult for people to talk about, or religion, that another belief system can really challenge our whole sense of ourselves. And so people kind of put up a lot of defenses there. And as I said, most humans, as you said, actually, I think most humans fear conflict. And yet, even though it's everyday part of our life. So right now, I want you to think about a time when you were in conflict with somebody. Just kind of think about who it was with, what was going on. Think about how you were feeling. And think about what you wanted and needed in that moment. Okay. So how did you feel? And you can just throw it out in the chat or just throw it out in the verbally.
I just feel stressed every time whenever like I have conflicts with others.
Okay.
Yeah, but I try to like make sense why they doing certain things, why they say certain things. I try to understand them better. Then
Yep.
I try to figure out my own feelings. Like, why do I feel this way? What do I want from them?
Okay, good. See, all that's going on internally for you. And other people wrote, that they also feel anxious or they feel uneasy, right? Those are sort of common feelings that people have. Now, has anyone ever had a situation when they were in conflict with somebody where they might have felt energized or excited or interested? Maybe not the scenario I had you visualize.
When I had an argument with my boyfriend once, I feel a little excited because I was confident that I could like convince him. I was kind of confident that like I was right. So I was like excited to like prove that I was right.
Okay, so sometimes there is that feeling, right? There is some, and it can have that impact, especially when you feel confident in your opinion, or where you want to lead the relationship. What did you need in those moments? What did you need from the other person? What did you want most when you were in conflict with them? Someone said to listen. Yep. What else? To agree or to compromise. Okay. Yep. Anything else?
So I try to understand.
Try to understand and be understood. I mean, I think all of us, we want all of that, right? We want the other person to listen, to hear us, to understand where we're coming. And ideally, we want resolution where we agree or compromise or come up with some solution. So I'm going to just show a little video on the brain and how the brain and the body reacts to stress. And conflict is one of the main stressors for humans. So because we are always in relationship with people, so there is always that possibility of conflict. And for college students in the workplace, that's always something that's there, and it's a major stressor for people. Can you let me know if you can hear the video?
We know you're really busy, so we're keeping it quick. It's the manager minute or two.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit loud. A little bit.
Turn it louder. Okay, let me see if I can do that.
No, I meant it was a little bit too loud.
Oh, too loud. Okay. All right, let's see.
Not by a lot, though.
Okay, let's see how this goes.
We've all had conversations where we've left feeling like they just missed the mark. Why does this happen? Well, part of the reason has to do with our brain, specifically the amygdala. What's the amygdala, you ask? It's only Sarah's favorite part of the brain. The amygdala is the part of the brain that is constantly scanning your environment for threats so that it can move you into action so it can protect you. Those threats might be physical, mental, emotional, or even to our ego. One of the ways I like to think about the amygdala is to imagine it's this shaky little neurotic chihuahua. It's shaking and it's nervous and it's ready to bark at anything that it perceives as a threat. Some of us have more neurotic chihuahuas than others. So what does any of this have to do?
Okay, so let's talk about this video. I can, 1 second. Okay, so let's talk about that. So has anyone ever been in that situation where you're in a fight with somebody and then all of it, and then you come to some sort of a solution, right, that you're kind of okay with and the other person seems okay with, but then you or that other person says something and then gets it all going again? Has anyone ever had that situation? Reasons why that happens is because all those hormones that she talked about, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the testosterone, all those hormones that get activated when we're in conflict with somebody, they're still surging through your body, right? And so they make it so that part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that's responsible for reasoning and being open-minded and being compassionate, the more activated those hormones are, the more that part of you is shut down. And so sometimes you get the resolution you want, but you're still surging with all those hormones, and you just say something. And maybe you say something you don't even mean, and later you're like, I really don't know why I said that. Some of that is because your prefrontal cortex isn't really activated in that moment. The more you need it in some ways, the more you sometimes don't have access to it. And so, and one of the reasons why this gets activated when we're in conflict is because from an evolutionary point of view, being in relationship to others is necessary for our survival, right? In our society, more than, you know, evolutionary, when we had like a tiger going after us, where we had a fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, which I'm going to go over all those responses. Now it's really more about how we are in with others, because we're so interconnected. Any questions about that? Does that make sense?
I got kicked from the meeting for a little bit because my connection was unstable. It's fine now, but did I miss? I think I was only down for like a minute or two. Did I miss a lot in that minute, or did other people have a similar thing?
Did other people, did you see the video?
I saw the first like couple minutes of it, but then I got a notification saying networks were unstable, and then I got booted. But then I was able to get right back in. So
Yeah, me too. I got booted like twice.
Oh, okay, Grace, and all right. So should I replay? I'll replay a little bit of the video. Should I do that?
You don't need to, at least for me, but if other people want to or need to see it, then no complaints here.
Okay, so I mean, the gist of it is, of the video, and everyone got booted out. We're all having technical difficulties today. So the gist of it is that the more activated we are, when we perceive threat, we have the amygdala, which is always this radar that's looking for threat. When it perceives threat, we react and we have a stress response. And so the sympathetic nervous system, you know, the fight, flight, freeze response gets activated. And the more activated it is, the less we have access to our reasoning. And that's from a survival point of perspective. That's why, you know, but in modern times, it can get us into more trouble because our modern day threats are more around perceivement from others than from worrying about like being attacked by a tiger. So that's why it's so important when you are getting stressed to understand your stress response so that you can kind of manage it and then figure out maybe you need a timeout because, or someone else does, and then you need to come back and talk more, because the more activated you are, the more stress, the less you can reason. Okay, any questions about that? Does that make sense? Okay. So in terms of, so here's an example, right? So everyone's heard of the fight, flight, freeze response. So imagine there's like a tiger coming at you, right? And it's like almost, it's like right on top of you. Your only chance of survival is to fight, right? You try to poke its eye and try to, you know, hope that you can scare it enough and hurt it enough that it slinks away. In interpersonal relationship, it's more, you know, going to be you're wrong, I'm right. It's that fight. Or then the other one is flight, right? So maybe you see the tiger, and the tiger is off in a distance and it hasn't seen you. You just run and you hope that it hasn't seen you so it doesn't chase you. In interpersonal conflict, it might be more, let's talk about something else. Like I'm getting too overwhelmed by this, or it might be someone making a joke, right? Trying to kind of distract. The other one is freeze. That could be like if you see the tiger and the tiger's a little bit distant away from you, but it sees you and you see it, you freeze. And the reason you freeze is that if you start running, you're gonna get its predatory instinct going. Then it's gonna start chasing you. And then the final one, which I think it's getting more known, it's called fawn. Fawn is when something's right on top of you. So maybe the tiger is coming is like right on top of you, and you're like okay, I'm not going to be able to fight it, but I have some food with me, so I'm going to try to make friends with it. And then you give the food to the tiger and you're like, hey, kitty. And then you hope that the tiger will be nice to you and eat the food that you give it and ignore you and walk away. In interpersonal relationships, the fawning might be something more like, oh, okay, you're right. Being more like just kind of telling the other person what they need so that the conflict is over completely. The freeze response is more that you literally freeze up. You don't even know how you feel in that moment because you're so overwhelmed by conflict. And again, as I said earlier, there's so many things that can impact our own response to conflict. But if you recognize it in yourself and you start recognizing it in other people, then you can respond accordingly. Because a lot of times what happens when there's the initial conflict and then there's conflict about people's response. So imagine somebody's in the fight response and they're like, I know I'm right. And then somebody responds in the freeze by just being completely silent. Maybe that person, the person in the fight feels like that person's not taking them seriously. And so they feel that they're not being respected or their concerns aren't being respected. That person has nothing to say. Or maybe it's the flight person who makes a joke. And then again, the initial person feels again that the person who's in flight is not taking them seriously or taking the issue seriously. And it's not about that at all. It's about their own personal response. That makes sense? Any thoughts or questions about that? So we're going to talk, okay, we have about 20 minutes. So I am going to, wait, sorry. Okay, I'm going to put this assessment in the chat, and I'm going to have you all take it for sorry. Okay, here we go. All right. I am putting this in the chat. Do you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. What I'd like you to do is we're going to spend, I'd like you to take this assessment. Couple things before you take it. I tried to download it after I was done and it wouldn't let me download the whole thing. So I recommend printing it out or maybe taking, or just sort of keep it as a, if you want to hold on to it, just keep it, you know, as a tab, and then maybe try to figure out a way to save it after. So the other thing is that it's 30 questions. Don't think too long, just answer them. It'll say 1 out of 30, 2 out of 30, and then just go through it. And then at the end, it will compile your sort of default conflict resolution style. And then we'll talk about that, okay? So is everyone able to do it? Is there any problems with trying to do this? When you're done, can you just put in the chat that you're done? So for the sake of time, we're going to start talking about it. And I guess what I recommend is that you can, finish up this if you haven't finished it later. And I apologize that we have had so much technical difficulties, which meant that we started later than we intended. Okay. So in your response, if you look, it should give you a percentage of how much you are a certain type. Anyone want to just call out like what they were? Like the one that was like the first one, because that's the one that you most use.
I got avoidant.
Avoid, okay.
I got 83% avoider.
Okay. Avoid, yeah.
I got a computer.
Computer, okay. What else? Anyone else? Does that surprise anyone, your results?
I put my answer in the chat.
Okay,
Actually didn't surprise me.
okay. All right. So if you look at yours, it'll have the top one, and then it's going to have maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on how you scored, right? So most of the time mine is accommodator, and then the next one down for me is problem solver, and then the next one is avoider, and then, and then so on. So we all use these depending on the different ones, depending on situations. But again, maybe this is the one that you got first is the one that's kind of your default, your more comfortable one that you use. Now, do you think that so the ones are competer, avoider, accommodating, collaborating, and compromising. Do you think that there's any that's like the preferred one?
Probably compromising.
Okay, anyone else? When you think about most people say compromising, right? Because that's kind of like you're trying to get a win-win for everybody. But a couple things to think about when we are in dealing with conflict and conflict styles. One is how important the relationship is to us. The other one is how important are my needs?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it depends on the context and also depends on who I'm talking with, like interacting with.
Right. And so, and it will also be about the setting, right? So if you're in a work setting versus a group setting, so there are a lot of factors involved. But again, you know, this is kind of your generic, your default style. And this Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instruments used in a lot of human resources. And so what's nice about this is that there's really no right or wrong one, except each one has its pros and cons, right? Competing can be very great. It can be really great in a lot of ways, but maybe it's not, maybe it hurts relationships if someone always feels like they have to sort of be the one who is on top or winning, because that means someone else isn't getting their needs met. Someone on the opposite end who's accommodating all the time, maybe, you know, the relationships are strong, but they're holding back a lot about what they need, right? So, and so a lot of this is like this continuum. And so the other piece to think about is that there's relationship, personal needs, group needs, time, because a lot of different styles can take more time. So in terms of avoidance, you know, it can be useful when one party might need that time to calm down, or maybe when the issue isn't that important. Accommodating could be helpful when you're learning a new skill, right? So if somebody else knows something, they've been doing this longer. Okay, I'm gonna sit back and just listen and sort of see what I can learn from it. And again, maybe if the issue is not that important. Compromising is helpful when it's moderate importance, as this says. You kind of split the difference so that each party feels like they got something. And then competing can be helpful, especially like if you're really like competing for a contract or if you need to make a quick decision. And then collaborating, which can be helpful when you're trying to gain long-term commitments, when you're trying to integrate long-term solutions. Compromising and collaborating, they take more time. And so a lot of times those can be really helpful when you're working in a group setting, where that group is going to be, you're going to be with that group for a period of time, right? Then it's worth really sitting down and trying to understand a lot of the different components of what's going on in those group dynamics. So I already talked about self-awareness, and I certainly encourage you to read through the your conflict styles assessment. And again, one of the things about it is that even if one is your default, doesn't mean that you can't develop the skills around the other, because at certain times it's going to be helpful, especially as you move into more leadership roles. You know, I think it's important to sort of understand what your role is in when you're in conflict. If you're in a leadership role, then the expectation is that you're going to take on more of a leadership role to resolve the conflict. Understanding your own ANS is autonomic nervous system, which is the fight, flight, freeze response that I had talked about. If you understand it in yourself, you'll understand it more in others. And finally, and I know I'm going through a lot of this really fast, but if you are working in a group setting, and because this is a leadership conference, I think that, you know, this is something that you all are probably working in some capacity. You really want to, again, if there is conflict, think about the relationships and the time and what the solution is, right? What is it that the group is there meeting together for? What are they trying to accomplish? If you notice conflict, you want to sort of turn into kind of somebody who does the assessment of like, okay, what's going on here? Ideally, you talk privately to each member of the group and using your active listening skills, right? No phone, you're paying attention, you're reflecting back to them what they are saying to you. You want to identify what some barriers to moving past the conflict is, right? It could be someone's underlying fear about something, could be hidden agendas, misinformation, hurt feelings. Often I always think about like, what's the barriers to moving forward? So first there's the assessment piece. And then you want to acknowledge together with the group that, okay, this is going on. There are various points of view. And you want to validate that everyone's point of view has worth. That goes back to that earlier question about what did you want? You wanted to be heard. You want to someone to listen to you. We want to feel like what we have to say is worthwhile, even if it's not the solution in that moment. And it's important to just name that there is conflict. Be transparent about that part. You want to acknowledge the group attitude. Is there goodwill? Are people open-minded? Is there any of this sort of autonomic nervous system response going on right now when you're trying to talk about it? Are people shouting? Are people frozen? Those might be signs that it's time for people to take a time out, calm down, think about, reflect on what was said, come back, have more conversations. A lot of times people want to move through conflict really quickly, get to that compromise, be done. But if it's not fully addressed, especially if it's a long-term group that you're going to be working with, or if it's a long-term relationship, then it might come up again. And expect awkwardness, right? We're going to all feel awkward, feel anxious when we're trying to have these very difficult conversations. The other thing too, I didn't put it in there, you can also see it as an opportunity, because a lot of times I think that when we have been in conflict with somebody, we work through it, those relationships become deeper, more meaningful. So once you've done the assessment, seen where people are, you've kind of assessed the attitude of the group that you might be working with, or even the other individual. Then you want to sort of move more into that action. And you want to sort of, when you're talking, you want to avoid general characterizations that like, you're always late, you're always this. You want to sort of focus more on the present, what's going on. I feel statements can be really helpful. So is this idea of parts. There's a part of me that feels dismissed when you don't acknowledge what I said. Or there's a part of me that feels this way, as opposed to this idea that, it's all or nothing, because a lot of times we're actually internally more complex than that. If there are hurt feelings, then that's like a separate conversation that you want to have with those two private parties who feel hurt. And you want to focus on the solution. So what that looks like is, okay, we have a conflict, people want different things, but we have this goal that we have coming up in a few weeks. So how are we going to reach that goal? Looking at all this. And if you're in a leadership role, you might have to acknowledge, like, not everyone's going to get their way. But this is the best, based on these ideas, based on the time, this is, what you think is the best idea going forward. And then you want to analyze and reflect. You want to, you've done all this. And again, this is timely, right? So you want to analyze the result, reflect back as a group. If you meet regularly with somebody, you want to be able to say, oh, check in. How are things going? What do you all think? And you might have to kind of go through this again at different times. Okay. And again, I know because of time, we're almost done. I wanted to run through a scenario. Do we have time to do that? Oops.
I have to hop on another.
Another one? Okay.
Sure.
So my apologies again for all the barriers to having to be able to sort of try to put this all together into a conversation. Just some closing thoughts. We all acknowledge we have competing needs. What you want matters. What someone else wants matters. Conflict resolution isn't about dealing with harassment or abuse or contempt or violence, right? Those need to be addressed by those in power. So if you're in any organization, there are going to be people that are in place to address that. Respectful conflict can lead to creativity, growth, and deeper relationships. And it's also learning how to assert yourself and to calm your, and to try to take on these other types of conflict styles. It's like learning a new language. It's going to be uncomfortable in the beginning, but with some practice, it can get helpful. It can become easier, and it can be helpful for you. Okay, any thoughts, questions, feedback? All right, I'm going to stop sharing.
All right.
So-
Oh, I'm sorry, Julie, I could close out if you're ready or if you have any final thoughts.
No, again, I guess I just feel bad that, you know, that there were quite a few technical glitches along the way. So I know it was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Certainly, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me through the counseling services. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Julie. So just so everybody knows, on Friday, you will receive a link to complete a program evaluation. We are looking forward to your feedback. So thank you so much for your participation today, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.